Environmental justice sits at the intersection of climate change, equity, and community empowerment. In this episode of Brooklyn Savvy, I'm joined with thought leaders and advocates to examine the pressing environmental challenges facing urban communities. From the front lines of grassroots activism to the boardrooms, this conversation sheds light on how power and policy can drive progress. Guests include Elizabeth Yeampierre of UPROSE, Christine Osuji of Con Edison, Valerie White of LISC New York, and Steve Levin of Solar One. They'll share actionable steps on clean energy programs, community solar initiatives, and ways individuals can advocate for lasting change. Tune in for an inspiring discussion about creating a cleaner, greener, and more equitable future for Brooklyn and beyond. I wanted to create a safe space to have uncomfortable yet transformative conversations that move people, amplifying the voices of those who are underrepresented and who inspire positive change. I'm Toni Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy. Welcome, Brooklyn. We're here to talk about environmental justice, and I'm going to go directly to you, Elizabeth, because I know what an authentic advocate you have been in this space and really have admired and applauded your work for quite a long time, even though sometimes we were on different sides of the fence. I was still cheering for you. But anyway, talk to us about the roots of environmental justice, why this is something that is needed, and what you're doing about it.
Well, thank you so much for that question. It's a question that is rarely asked. Often people talk about environmental justice starting in the 70s, but the truth is that environmental injustice, environmental racism begins with the extraction of our land, with the colonialism of our countries and our spaces, with the enslavement of our people. And so you see then a move towards the disparate siting of environmental burdens in Black and brown communities all over the country and all over the global South. It is a story that has deep roots and really begins there. I think it starts in the slave quarters, when people don't have access to good food, when they don't have access to land that they can use to grow it, where they get poor medical care, where all of the circumstances are about how it impacts their health and their environment. And then when you see the enslaved free themselves, you see those communities surrounded by petrochemical industries like you see in Port Arthur, Texas. So it was very intentional, it was by design, and it has a long, deep history. And then the same corporations that have abused us here are the same corporations that have done harm in the global South.
So I want to know then, what is essentially being done about it? Now I know, Christine, you are the new director of environmental justice for an energy services company, Con Ed. Talk to us about these marginalized communities and what we're doing about that.
The New York State Climate Justice Working Group really helped do something that was groundbreaking for New York State so that we could have these very open, authentic, and transparent conversations as it relates to equity. So, and I'll give a big shout out to Elizabeth, because she was on that climate justice working group. And this particular group, what they did is they identified the disadvantaged communities within New York State. And they looked at all the different factors that Elizabeth was mentioning, 45 indicators to identify communities within New York State that would be classified as disadvantaged. So some of the things that you look at, environmental burdens such as flooding, right, such as air pollution, such as even some of the population characteristics of a particular neighborhood when you're looking at ethnicity as a factor in race. Because yes, Black and brown communities are disproportionately and negatively impacted by some of the environmental burdens. And they also looked at socioeconomic factors, so poverty levels, because poor communities, low-income communities, are also disadvantaged in this conversation as we're talking about clean energy transition. So I want to start there first, because I think—
What about asthma rates? Are those considered?
Yes.
Okay, right.
Yes, yes. So there's 45 indicators. So I think that was really a step in the right direction, very leading for us as a state to identify what they were and are. And some interesting things that came out of that is that 60% of the disadvantaged communities are within New York City.
Ooh.
So yeah, I want to pause a little bit
Yeah.
because that's significant, right?
Right, very, very.
And then when we use the mapping tool that was developed to really identify these communities against how our customers, we were able to see that 46% of our customers are in disadvantaged communities in Con Edison. So that's also significant.
Right. So what does that mean to a Con Ed?
So what that means is that as we are strategizing, because it's basic, what we do at Con Edison is that we deliver an energy infrastructure to our customers. We want to make sure that it's safe, it's reliable, it's resilient, it's affordable, and it is enabling the equity, clean, justice environment. So, and we need to be mindful in how we build, how we plan, the incentives that we offer in these disadvantaged communities, because some of it is correcting the historical wrongs that have occurred.
That could be really challenging and difficult to make happen, though, because I'm thinking of the NYCHA houses, and oftentimes there might have been a power plant or something, that type of infrastructure where that was existing, and then we have the NYCHA houses.
Right, you see in Fort Greene, in the Lower East Side, in different parts of the city that NYCHA housing went up right next to all of the environmental infrastructure, right next to the power plants. You see how the plumes are going into the windows where children live and are breathing and where elders are trying to take care of their families. We have been trying to decommission peaker plants. We've trying to get them replaced with community-owned solar, with battery storage, and we've been successful in literally shutting down some of these power plants. But a lot of this infrastructure that contaminates the environment, the toxic exposure, those things literally, we've got our communities right adjacent, living in the middle of that toxic soup.
So what's Solar One doing in this, Steve? Because I know that your organization is very much, related to environmental education, youth, and environmental justice. So how are you responding?
Well, our mission at Solar One is to bring the benefits of renewable energy to marginalized communities. And so we do that several different ways. We do K-12 environmental education around clean energy. So we're in New York City public schools. We're in hundreds of city public schools every year, reaching thousands of students, really teaching them to be and inspiring them to be the clean energy leaders of the future. We also work with partner organizations, other nonprofits, wonderful nonprofits, Brooklyn nonprofits like St. Nick's or the Hope Program, Green City Force, and we provide green workforce education so that we can help upskill New Yorkers who are in search of employment, who are unemployed or underemployed or facing barriers to employment, so that they can participate in the clean energy revolution. And that means not just working on solar installation or HVAC installation, but we also are nowadays really looking at how we can expand new businesses and helping to create new environmental justice businesses. So a new solar company, new HVAC company, new technologies, and really doing our best to help people participate from that side. And then we work to get solar and other renewables to communities in New York City that have largely been marginalized from renewable energy. Solar has been, it's not just for a high-income neighborhood.
I'm installing solar panels right now. I think I need a degree to do that. Just kidding. But no, seriously, there is a process to this.
There is a process.
Installing solar is not the easiest thing to do. There's so many steps within this. Does your organization help the customer with that? I mean, because, it starts kind of with the solar installer coming, selling you this great product, talking to you about all these incentives, you say yes, and then they install, and then you wait.
So Solar One has a wonderful team who's primarily responsible for making sure that the technical assistance is being done for the customer. So that's doing the roof analysis, doing the financing analysis. In often cases, we'll actually put together an RFP to put it out to installers. So we'll do that pre-development work, which saves the customer money. We do that work both for 1 to 4 family homes and for multifamily homes as well.
And then, no, I do like my solar. I mean, I know that this is the right thing to do for my environmental footprint as well as for my pocketbook. So I know that, but you know, it's something that people really have to think hard and long about. You know, just think about it.
I think that what customers experience in solar is probably what they also experience in other clean energy programs and initiatives that we have, like electrifying their homes. If they want to exchange for heat pumps, that sometimes the process can be a little bit cumbersome. And this is the feedback that we're receiving from customers, and is a potential barrier. So these are things that we have to take a look at, and how we're educating, like you said, the installers, making sure that they're getting the one-on-ones that they need to make this process a little bit less cumbersome for customers, so that they're more open to wanting to be a part of this clean energy society.
Right, Valerie, yes.
So as we look at climate and climate justice and clean energy, it's the intersection between the customer, what we're talking about, but it also impacts how we develop. And of course, you know, I work in the area of developing affordable housing, and that is a big issue in terms of what developers are able to put into the products that they are providing for the community. We do work with developers through our developers training programs, so that those that are providing affordable housing, they understand the different aspects of what needs to be in that development project, but it also impacts the price, right? So it is a little bit onerous on the underwriting, which is a very thin margin as it is anyway, for these developers to provide affordable housing. But in a broader context, when we think about climate and climate justice, the actual physical place where people of color are living is a big impact to some of the things that we do and work on at the company that I am at, LISC, down to looking at transportation alternatives on the east side of Buffalo. I know we're in Brooklyn. I'm a Brooklyn girl myself, but we do work across the state, and that's one of the bigger projects that we have, looking to find an alternative for a community that's transportation isolated, that can't get anywhere, but is suffering the impact of fumes from the 2 interstates that enclose that particular community, the east side of Buffalo, that have the health issues, that don't have the access to jobs, that don't have the access to entrepreneurship, but they're suffering from asthma and hypertension and you know, lack of transportation, all of the things of the socioeconomic things that impact their ability to have equitable access. So it's sort of a twofold thing that we look at.
So I also want to add that some of the things like working for an energy company, because we play a key role in, we do offer incentives for our customers, for project developers, working closely with them, working closely with NYSERDA, to getting incentives, so that in some of, like in particular, we have this no pipeline alternative program, where we're really trying to move customers off of non-renewable fossil fuels to heat their homes and things like that, so that they can be fully electrified, so that we can retire these gas mains and eliminate methane emissions, which impact, you know, the health, has the health impacts. For a customer who may be low income, and you know, there are days where I'm like, I don't know if I can afford to invest in something like that, right? When you think about the cost, the upfront cost that it might take to electrify your home. But now, you know, hearing from environmental justice groups that are really at the front line and working with customers, we're making these things much more accessible. So we're doing the reimbursements for it, working with the project developers and them getting the financing and guaranteeing that they will get these incentives covered at no, so for the customer, it's invisible. They don't see it. They don't have to put money out of their pockets and then ask for reimbursement and have to wait for it. It's being done now more so at the developer end.
Oh, that's very, very, very interesting. And now, a question I wanted to ask, though, is oftentimes energy companies are viewed as the culprits, right? So how have you navigated that? How does an energy company who's responsible for this infrastructure find a way to work with communities in a way that they trust us. And I say us because I used to work for your company, Con Edison.
And I think that's an ongoing relationship building with our customers, with our external stakeholders, environmental justice advocates, because there is a trust issue, right?
Always.
And I think that, you know, as a company, we understand that this is what we need to do. The state has made it very clear, this is what we need to do, New York State. So it's about aligning ourselves and not thinking that we have the solutions, because we don't know the solutions. We need to be able to work together collaboratively, because one of the key principles of environmental justice is that the voices of the most impacted communities, disadvantaged or marginalized communities, need to be at the table, need to be amplified, need to be involved in the solutions, so that we can really ensure that we're making the right impact to the disadvantaged communities. I remember I was listening to a podcast that you were on, Elizabeth, and one of the statements that was made, and it really resonated with me, is that if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And those are things that we really have to make sure that the voices are there at the table when we're making these decisions.
So the thing is that we are at the table. We are on the street and we're at the table. There wouldn't be a Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act without us. There wouldn't have been
So you're at the policy
a Justice 40 initiative without us. There wouldn't have been an executive order without us. The talk about environmental justice can't just live with renewable energy and access to renewable energy and solar.
Right.
Valerie, you were right in talking about mass surface transit. We need to have investments in mass surface transit. We need to have food sovereignty, because we know extreme weather events are going to come with heat, and so we're going to need to have places where people can go and cool off. And that's one of the initiatives that is funded by Con Ed. We're going to need to have access to drinkable water. And what that means is really sort of thinking about a multiplicity of needs. Remember, people like talking about, they want to talk about a green economy, but a green economy is not necessarily a just economy. We talk about a just transition, because we know that transition is inevitable, but justice is not. So how do you invest in infrastructure that addresses the four things that people in our communities are demanding? Because we have solutions for those. They're demanding renewable energy and using renewable energy to create community wealth. They want food sovereignty, drinkable water, and wellness. And we have opportunities in a community like Sunset Park, where we are in the largest significant maritime industrial area. That sector, that sector has played a role in toxic exposure and harm, and really can forge a path to a just transition. It could be engaged in green manufacturing. It could be involved in climate adaptation and mitigation and resilience. That would require land use and zoning decisions that are different, and investments. I don't want people to walk away thinking that we don't have operational solutions. Our solutions aren't just aspirational, they are operational. We are real clear about everything that has to be done in order to make sure that communities are going to survive recurrent extreme weather events. I think about Buffalo, I love Buffalo, and when there's extreme colds in Buffalo, we're praying in Brooklyn. And we're wondering whether the people on the ground have the resources necessary to withstand the extreme cold. And that's why we're movement people, because what happens to you in Buffalo is important to us in Brooklyn. But in Buffalo, there are solutions, and they just need investments and support. But those solutions are coming from the people that are most impacted.
With the solutions that you've identified, operational solutions, what are some of the biggest hurdles that you face?
Well, you know, we just launched the first community owned solar initiative of its kind in New York. Sunset Solar, 170 subscribers, and it took us 6 years, right? It's going to be up and running in December, and we've already signed the lease. It took us 6 years, and it required that we raise an enormous amount of money. I think sometimes and often political will. You know, we're now looking at the Jackie Gleason bus depot and that rooftop, which is right across from our office, that would serve 1,000 families. And site control in New York City is an issue. If you're in New York City, you're in densely populated communities where we don't own the property, we lease. So we look at, you know, whether or not driving parking lots can be used to put community-owned canopies, solar canopies, and small businesses can benefit from that. We are really looking at how do you create a bandwidth of stakeholders that will support each other and understand that climate change is here. I mean, people act like the fires didn't just happen in California,
Right.
like there wasn't an orange sky, like Prospect Park wasn't burning, like Inwood wasn't burning. It is here. And it is going to impact those communities that are least responsible for it the most. And so investments have to be made in the most vulnerable. But yeah, some of the infrastructure is difficult, but we're doing it. We're operationalizing it and just believing that that those alternatives are worth investing in is, I think, one of the biggest challenges.
How are you getting your community mobilized, though? Meaning because we all live in our bubbles, and sometimes climate change is not something that when you're looking at, am I going to eat today, or am I going to worry about the climate? I mean, how do you do that?
Well,
Make that happen?
our organization is intergenerational, and we all remember that our aunties and our grandmothers would talk about recycling, reusing, repurposing, because there's nothing more sustainable than someone who has never had the things that they need, right? We have always done that. We've always lived within our carbon footprint. And so in a community like ours, where people are coming from different places, they remember those practices. And so ancestral knowledge is tremendously important, and providing people with the tools actually has not been so hard. People know when the weather is changing. They know that if it is November and it is 86 degrees outside, that something is wrong.
Something is
and
wrong,
that
right.
that something is not only affecting how things grow, it's affecting their ability to breathe. Our people have high levels of asthma, and diabetes was one of the things that we pushed. I pushed hard on that. And so they know, but what they don't know is what to do about it.
Right,
And that's
exactly,
where we come in.
exactly,
And that's
right.
where we come in, and we create the spaces for people in a very joyful way, in a way that celebrates difference and culture and arts. If the families in your community dealing with houselessness, if they're dealing with extreme policing, if they're dealing with ICE raids, if they're dealing with all of the attacks at their existence, are they going to care about climate change?
Right.
Well, then we need to make the connection about how climate change is going to exacerbate all of the isms and all of the kinds of conditions that they have had to endure for generations.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, in addition, right, on a regular basis, families may not be thinking about it, but then you have an emergency, right? Then you have a fire in California, and you mentioned Buffalo, where the extreme weather last time, I think 40 people froze in their home because their house wasn't appropriately insulated, or some of the issues that we've seen here in the city with the floods and the basement apartments. They are primarily the same group of individuals who are not getting that support. So as you operationalize and talk about the potential ways of dealing with climate justice, there also has to be something when an emergency happens, that there's an equitable access of support and help for those community members.
And in the climate justice movement, we call that a just recovery, people to people solution. We know that FEMA is now on the chopping block. And one of the things that we say is, what if the cavalry doesn't come? So what we've done is we are training tons of people on CPR, on stopping the bleed. And so we're providing people with that training, because you're absolutely right. In our organization, we have people that are experts in land use and zoning, that understand native plants and what needs to be grown. And we have GIS mappers. And one of the things that we did was we mapped, we learned that our community is not going to cooling centers. They're just not, for a lot of reasons. Remember, our community runs from 15th Street to 65th, 8th Avenue to the waterfront, 130,000 people. And it's almost like a lot of communities within one community. And for whatever reason, undocumented, you've got 3 children, maybe you're mobile, your mobility is limited. And so we looked around to see what are the institutions that exist that can be anchors of resistance in our community. And what we learned was that we've got 2 to 3 churches per block. We've
Okay,
got more
right.
than 80 churches in our community, and that while they're active during the weekend, they're not during the week, and that those are buildings, those are spaces that can be places where we can have cooling, where people can have access to food and water. And we've set up meetings with ministers and faith-based leaders because we have to look at place and we have to be hyper-local to address these recurrent extreme weather events that are unpredictable, can be very violent. We don't know what to expect. And we've done a number of things, like we've planted tons of trees in the neighborhoods, in the parts of the neighborhood that have the least income and have the highest health disparities. We've stopped the siting of power plants. We've doubled the amount of open space. So we are solutionaries.
Yes.
I want
Right.
to say that. We are solutionaries. I
Yes.
want to say that because often when people talk to EJ leaders or people who are grassroots organizers, they want to hear the sad story of
True.
the problems,
Right,
and
right.
they don't
Want the
and they don't
solutions.
listen to
Right.
the part about how we have literally changed the landscape.
No, and I think we're going to probably have to wrap right there, but I will say that those were poignant words and things that we need to take heed to. Well, thank you all. This was quite an interesting conversation on environmental justice, and we will see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.